Okay, the truck forum. Now, we tend to grizzle about trucks, and trucks grizzle about car users who don't understand what they're doing and they pull in front of trucks. Bring it down to basics. I've got some figures in front of me. Over the past 5 years, across Victoria, not just metropolitan, but across Victoria, 506 people have been killed in incidents involving heavy vehicles, and 3,328 have been injured. Now, they're horrendous figures, but there's a lot of trucks on the road. There's a lot of trucks on the road. In the studio with me is the Victoria Police Acting Assistant Commissioner Neville Taylor, Chief Executive Vic Roads John Merritt, and the Acting Chief Executive Victorian Transport Association Peter Anderson. Gentlemen, good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Morning, Neil.
Neville Taylor, these figures, 506 over 5 years, are they improving?
Look, Neil, they are. As you know, we're very proud of Victoria as the whole road trauma, but road toll in particular, has significantly dropped. And of course, last year we had a significantly record low road toll with 243 deaths. What you see in the heavy vehicle data is positive because it follows that same trend. And in fact, last year in 2013, we had very low rates of fatalities that in one way or another involved heavy vehicles. But this year, we're concerned just where we're at right now.
What are we up to at the moment?
Okay, the data that we have is up to the end of July,
Yep.
and we know that from the 26 crashes involving heavy vehicles in Victoria, there's been 30 fatalities.
So it's the end of July, we're ahead of all of last year.
That's right, we're already two more than what we had with heavy vehicles all of last year. So that certainly got all of those in the agencies and the industry working very feverishly together around trying to arrest that for this year.
Well, Peter Anderson, from the industry point of view, any ideas why? What's happened?
Neil, no, there's no specific trend that's pointing to the sudden increase. Keeping in mind the statistics do show that trucks are involved in more accidents on the road, but whether that's because of congestion or whether that's due to more activity of trucks on the road, we can't tell.
Sorry, what do you mean? Trucks are being involved in more crashes? What do you mean?
If the trucks are involved in crashes, that's what the statistics are telling us.
But are you saying there's an increase in them?
Well, that's what the statistics are telling us, yes.
Not just fatalities, but crashes overall.
Crashes overall, yes.
Have you seen any figures on that, Neville Taylor?
Look, I don't have those exact figures other than the trauma that we've got here in front of us, Neil, but what Peter is saying is right. And one of the disturbing things that we find as our analysts review this all the time is that in most cases, the fault of the incident is actually not at the cause of the driver of the heavy vehicles. Certainly, when you put a heavy vehicle in the network and the vehicles around it, there is vulnerability. And that's the message we need to keep getting across to all road users, that everybody has a responsibility. This is not just about banging on at the truck drivers. At times we do see incidents caused because of high-risk behaviour by truck drivers, but more often than not, it's because of high-risk behaviour by other road users.
You mentioned that to the end of July, we're already ahead of last year's fatalities. Do you have the seriously injured numbers as well for that period?
Yes, we do. So to the where we are, last year in
Last year was
2013,
262 seriously injured.
seriously injured. I'm sorry, I don't have that for
this
where
year.
we are now. We're really looking at what the road toll is.
Yeah, well, I would assume it'd be higher as well.
Look, we do, but going back to your first question, what we have found, when we look at the 5-year trends, with heavy vehicles as it is with all of road trauma, that there is around about a 10% drop in overall road trauma. So we're very confident that by approaching all the safety systems to reduce overall road trauma, that is the way to go.
Well, John Merritt, what on the sort of from the Vic Roads point of view, do you see any reasons? Is the number of heavy vehicles increasing? Number of trucks on the roads increasing?
What we're seeing across the board with this year's road toll is that the encouraging news is that the number of actual accidents out there is about the same. Tragically, as you'd be aware, Neil, we've had a number of multiple person fatalities, and in particular, your listeners will be aware of the terrible incident we had up near Albury a couple of months ago, where 3 people lost their lives. So, when the numbers are low like this, they can bounce around. Our message today is that VicPol and the industry and Vic Roads are and will continue to work together to improve the way in which trucks operate on our roads, but particularly the way in which car drivers interact with the trucks.
That's the problem. Is that agreed? The three of you agree? The
Absolutely.
interaction.
That's right.
I mean, I talk about it being a war on the roads, and at times it is. That's the sort of atmosphere we've got.
And look, it's really that issue that brings us here today. What we're seeing is a growing reliance on freight and freight moving on our roads, and that will continue to grow significantly. We've obviously got growth in our motor vehicles on the roads, and we can't have a situation where our attitudes don't change. We need to drive and move together. And look, in so many of the incidents that we see that involve a truck, it's not the truck driver's fault. The truck driver has taken evasive action because someone's cut in front of them. From a Vic Roads point of view, a simple thing like that can block our freeway and cause everyone enormous dismay on their way home from work.
96900 693 13 13 32. Truck drivers and other motorists as well. Just to stay with your point, John Merritt, looking at the truck volumes on Westgate, it's gone up only about 2,000 in the past 4 or 5 years.
Well, we've been, I suppose, fortunate, Neil, because of the advent of higher productivity trucks. This is an issue for drivers. They get uncomfortable around the B-doubles and the bigger trucks, but they're enabling us to keep the growth in actual truck numbers constant because we can move more freight.
But is there an increase in B-doubles, those big things?
Yes, there is. Yes,
there is, Neil.
there's been a significant increase in B-doubles.
How significant? Do you know, Peter Anderson, off the top?
Specifically, no direct information, Neil, but generally speaking, from an operator's perspective, it's much better, much more economical to put the freight on a larger vehicle to move it from point to point rather than a number of smaller vehicles.
John Merritt, do you have any figures on the increase?
Look, the numbers at the moment show us with about 17,000 registered semi-trailers in Victoria, and about half of those are B-doubles. So B-doubles weren't even on the road not that long ago. So it has grown, and we are seeing a real push from the industry to increase productivity by putting more high productivity vehicles on the road.
Well, Assistant Commissioner Taylor, does that, Acting Assistant Commissioner Taylor, does that send a message to police? Are the B-doubles a particular problem, do you think, with motorists or not? Other motorists, I mean.
Yeah, look, not significantly, Neil. We certainly don't get the complaints from motorists around that, and certainly in our role, and I work collectively with John and the other industry representatives on the Freight Council of Victoria, and we support the philosophy around reducing the number of heavy vehicles on the road, which is what the high productivity freight trials is doing. So we're a supporter of that, and we haven't seen anything significant in our enforcement that has drawn us to those particular vehicles. I think what we'll find over time is as the demands on freight grow, as John was highlighting, but the ability to reduce the number of heavy vehicles on the road will go some way towards that. You call it a war on the roads, but it's about really, I don't know, the misunderstanding or the ignorance or just other road users not patient, but that when you put a car or a motorcycle with a 60-odd plus tonne vehicle and someone makes a mistake, it's inevitable which one's going to come off worse.
I see two problems, and I guess this sort of sums it up. I see that ignorance you're talking about, where people don't understand jumping in front of a truck, small gap, causing massive problems, blind spots, all these things. I mean, they did teach me to drive a big truck, and I learned a hell of a lot that way. And then on the other hand, I see some bullying by truck drivers who do behave, some at times, like idiots. So we've got two groups there that need addressing. The truck driver, who does behave that way, travels too fast, tailgates, does this sort of thing, bullies their way around the road, and the motorists who does stupid things as well. How do we reach them?
Well, I think the first thing, Neil, is that the number of drivers, both car and truck, who do the right thing are in the vast majority.
True.
Right? And that message alone we're trying to get across to our community, that you can assume quite reasonably that most drivers are doing the right thing. And I know in working with Peter's organisation and visiting some of his members, some of the bigger fleet operators go to enormous trouble in selection of their drivers, training of their drivers and maintaining their fleet. Those who do cause issues, like in all parts of life, are at the margin. And the industry and VicPol and VicRoads are very keen to get on top of those people at the margin who cause the trouble.
Peter Anderson, are we checking the trucks often enough? There's been argument, I've talked to the police in the past about whether there is enough requirement to do roadworthy tests and the like on the trucks. Are you sufficiently regulated?
There's no doubt, Neil, that the regulatory powers are increasing upon the transport industry. Engines themselves are a lot more efficient than what they used to be. The actual designs of trucks are improving, but also the drivers themselves, the training programs that are now being put into place in most of the transport companies are part of the regulatory process now, and it's important that the industry itself recognises the value this places, not just to their own business economically, but where they're placed within the community. And it's important that we recognise the community and with the responsibilities we have towards the general public.
We need to take a break, and we'll take some of those calls in a moment. But Peter Anderson, on behalf of the industry, if you could do one thing to improve what happens out there, what would it be?
I think the first thing we'd do would be make sure that we're regulated correctly to be able to blend in with the rest of the community, yes, indeed.
Anybody support the idea of trucks being required to keep in the left-hand lane?
Well, we already have that requirement
on
the Geelong Road and on the Eastern Freeway. Look, we don't have it on the Monash, and I know some of your listeners will be interested in that. It's really just the number of interchanges on that road at the moment makes that impractical.
Does it make any difference, Neville Taylor, on the roads?
Yeah, look, we think it does. The philosophy around it is the segregation, both from lane usage and also looking at speed. So let's recognise what we're doing in Victoria is trialling that. And we see that there is a lot of support through it, both from industry, from our enforcement people and other road users that we hear from.
How long's the trial got to go?
Look, I think that trial's almost complete. Can I make the point, though, Neil, which you just touched on? One of our most basic risks on these roads is changing lanes. People making mistakes, merging, creates so much of our troubles, not just in accidents, but in congestion. So there's a real incentive for us to want to keep trucks over in the left. The issue that we have at the moment is if we fill those left-hand lanes full of trucks on the Monash, we've got so many exit and entry points. There's just a real impracticality about that.
We'll take a break, and your calls for the truck debate. Truck Forum, 96 900 693 13 13 32.